Here we are at number 1 Smithery, one of the finest buildings on the Dockyard, dating from 1808. As you can see, a bit of a building site at the moment. That's a good thing because it represents the end of a 7-year struggle to raise £12.5 million to create a fantastic new project in partnership with the National Maritime Museum and the Imperial War Museum. Everybody, I think, will recognise two major national institutions coming here to Medway to make a real point about the cultural focus that there is both here at the Dockyard and within this great conurbation that is Medway. Originally this area was open, the roof was put on in about 1860. This area is a fundamental part of number 1 Smithery. It's an area where lots of cultural activity will happen. There'll be learning activities. We're putting in a fantastic tow tank where children will learn about the properties of ships through the models, how they behave in the water and so on. But importantly, it'll be a centre for art and activity and culture, theatre on occasions, a covered space. One of the things the Trust likes to do when it restores buildings is shows the archaeological discoveries that we found, like the plate track here for narrow gauge locomotives bringing heavy items in and out of number 1 Smithery, and also the restoration work that we do in terms of things like the mortar line on that arch there. As you can see, that arch was in a parlour state when we started work on this building 3 years ago. The public can see that, but I can assure you that it's completely safe. Now we're in the touring exhibition gallery, the gallery. Very important space within number 1 Smithery in the future. Great history, and this space is all about environmental conditioning, having very important collections coming in here, potentially from all over the world. Art, objects of all kinds, coming through on a regularly turning over basis, bringing in new audiences again. Interesting in terms of our environmental strategy, sadly this is one of those spaces in the building that will have to have air conditioning. To get the right conditions and so that it's not damp for the collections, we need to get the right environment. The building strategy here is that the monument is still protected. Behind these steel structures you can see here, all of the original artefacts are still on the walls. We haven't interfered with those walls. If in the long-term future this needed to be removed, you'd never know we'd been here. From the gallery we come into this wonderful space, one of my favourite parts of the building. You can see it's very tall, light and airy, wonderful detail in the cast iron roof trusses, typical of the work of the Dockyard of this period. In the future, this room is going to be used for learning and education purposes, and very importantly for spaces for corporate entertainment, for lectures and the like about the wonderful exhibits that will be going on next door. So we're walking by the original forges here, one of the most historic parts of the building. It tells the very story of the reason that this building existed from 1808. The smiths would have been busy at work, the heat, the smoke. And on my right, we see complete counterpoint, the new insertion, the home of the permanent gallery where the wonderful objects and artifacts are going to be housed in new buildings. But you'll see that beyond that, you can see through that and the roof and the whole historic building, very important in terms of our Trust's objectives. One of the challenges with getting this building ready for museum uses was to ensure that the objects contained within it were safe in every way. So top level of security, obviously, but flooding is an issue. We're in the floodplain of the Medway, and we needed to meet 1,000-year flood levels in these days of climate change. And you can see behind me that we had to raise the level of the floors within the building by over 1 metre in some places. And should that dreadful occasion happen when the Medway floods, the objects inside will be completely safe. When we created the partnership with our two National Museum partners, it gave us the opportunity to save this wonderful building. It was in a terrible state. There was buddleia growing out of every part of it. Today, as you can see, it's back in its, I won't say pristine state, because the Trust has a philosophy of honest repairs. We like to see the repair that we've done displayed for all to see, and behind me is a really good example of that, where the subsidence of the building can be clearly seen.
This is the anchor pit. It's one of the most important and interesting bits of the archaeology of the building that was found during the restoration works. And it's basically a hole in the ground connected to a chimney. And it was used, we think, for helping to descale anchors when they came back in for repairs, rusty and the like. They were put in here, a fire built round them, and the whole lot heated up so that the scale fell away, and then they could be reworked and taken back into service. This is the orientation gallery. This is where visitors are going to arrive in the building, and this is where they're going to get their first museum experience. They're going to walk up here following an audiovisual floor show on the floor and get to a big model in a big case here. There's going to be a model of the Jarvis Bay in it, a very significant ship to all the partners. We'll tell the story of how she was an emigrant ship to Australia, taken up into service as a Second World War armed merchant cruiser, sunk in action, huge loss of life, a loss of life that were all actually Chatham related because she was a Chatham manned ship. We're going to tell that story by audiovisual means with an audiovisual programme that runs around a big structure that's mounted overhead of the case. We've begun to call it the kite, and we'll actually be able to stand and look at this from all the way around the model and see the story as it rolls round and around above our heads. It's going to be really exciting. This is the pipe bending floor. Big cast iron slabs perforated with holes, and they were used to bend hot metal into shape for shipbuilding. It's known as the pipe bending floor because a lot of the work that went on here was bending pipes, shaping them particularly for things like the steam machinery and for steam and water and all the sorts of myriad of things that you needed pipes on a warship for. They were also used to bend other bits of metal, and what they did was they put a pattern down out of timber, put metal pegs into these holes around the pattern, brought hot metal out of the forges. There's one on either side of us here, used the crane to swing them into place, and then used big pneumatic hammers, air compressors, to really push like mad at the hot metal, bend it into shape. We're going to do the same with plastic with children. It's going to be great fun. Another thing about the pipe bending floor and this whole space, and you can see it here with the forges and the furnaces, is this was one of the places in the Smithery, or like most of the Smithery, it was a very, very hot, dirty, and in many ways dangerous environment. People are moving very large amounts of very, very hot metal around. Get in the way of it and you could get seriously hurt. The whole noise of pneumatic steam hammers, many of them being used at the same time, must have created a cacophony of sound that would have deafened anybody and everybody in the near vicinity. Here will be collections displayed from the two national museums. This is the permanent maritime galleries, and we're going to be able to draw material from Imperial War Museum and National Maritime Museum's collections, ship models, paintings, other works of art, even things like gold plate, amazing treasures from those collections will be displayed at Chatham for the first time. Next to the permanent galleries is this area, the collection study area, and it's here that the other part of this project's great story starts to unfold. This is where members of the public, researchers, can come and make appointments to see material that's stored in the repositories in the Smithery. The repositories, the stores, are really at the heart of the National Museum collection side of this project. These are state-of-the-art buildings within the building, very thick walls designed to work as a passive environment. Conservation heating around the perimeter will enable us to control the relative humidity and the temperature in here without the need for air conditioning. Very, very green solution to ensuring that we provide the best environmental conditions for national collections. Over 3,500 models are going to be stored in the repositories. Models of all shapes and sizes, from the tiniest, most fragile prisoner of war models from the French Revolution through to some quite big monsters that celebrate British shipbuilding in its heyday at the turn of the First World War. The majority are going to be stored in roller racking, tightly compact racking that will fill these spaces. But some of the really big ones, particularly those that are in their own original display cases, will be displayed here. Behind me, there's a viewing corridor, our visitors will be able to peek into a repository and see for themselves really what goes on behind the scenes in National Museum collections.